You just spent $1,200 on a cold air intake, a performance exhaust, and a throttle response controller. You installed everything in your driveway over a weekend. You started the car. It sounds different. The exhaust has a deeper note. The intake has a satisfying whoosh. The throttle feels sharper. You take it for a drive and you're convinced this car is faster. You can feel it. The butt dyno says yes. You post a video. Your friends confirm it sounds mean. The mod was worth it. Except it wasn't. Because when you actually put the car on a dynamometer, a machine that measures real power output at the wheels, the numbers tell a different story. Your cold air intake added 3 horsepower. Your exhaust added 5. Your throttle response controller added 0 horsepower because it doesn't create power. It just changes the pedal mapping so the car feels more responsive without actually being faster. You spent $1,200 and 12 hours of labor for 8 horsepower on a car that makes 275. That's a 2.9% improvement. You would literally get a bigger performance gain by taking 50 pounds of junk out of your trunk. The car modification industry is enormous, billions of dollars per year globally. Some of that money buys real performance. Some of it buys noise, aesthetics, and the feeling of speed without any actual speed. And most people can't tell the difference because they evaluate mods with their emotions instead of a dyno sheet. The exhaust sounds faster, so it must be faster. The intake whooshes, so it must be flowing more air. The car feels quicker, so it must be quicker. Feelings are not data. Let's talk about what actually works, what doesn't, and where your money goes furthest if you genuinely want to make your car faster. To understand why most basic modifications produce minimal results on a stock or near-stock car, you need to understand one principle. Modern cars are already well optimized from the factory. Manufacturers spend millions of dollars engineering the intake, exhaust, and engine management systems on your car. They use computational fluid dynamics to design intake paths that maximize airflow. They tune the exhaust to balance power, emissions, and noise regulations. They calibrate the ECU with thousands of hours of dyno testing and real-world validation. The factory setup is not leaving massive power on the table. It's already operating close to optimal within the constraints of emissions compliance, noise regulations, warranty concerns, and production cost. When you bolt on an aftermarket intake or exhaust, you're making small changes to a system that's already been professionally optimized. The gains are real but marginal, typically 2 to 10 horsepower on a naturally aspirated engine. On a 200 horsepower car, that's 1 to 5%. You won't feel 5% in normal driving. You might feel it at wide open throttle on a dyno in a controlled environment with instrumented measurement. On the street, it's lost in the noise of temperature variation, fuel quality differences, and the natural variability of your driving. This doesn't mean bolt-on mods are worthless. It means their value is primarily in sound, aesthetics, and the personal satisfaction of modifying your car, not in measurable performance gains. If you want your car to sound better and you enjoy the process of modifying it, an exhaust is a great purchase. Just don't expect it to transform your car's performance. Expectations are everything. The cold air intake is the most popular first mod for new enthusiasts, and it's the one that most consistently underdelivers on its performance promise. The theory is sound. Colder air is denser. Denser air contains more oxygen. More oxygen allows more fuel to be burned, and more fuel burned means more power. This is real physics. A 30-degree drop in intake air temperature can theoretically increase power by 3 to 5%. The problem is that most aftermarket cold air intakes don't actually deliver significantly colder air than the factory intake. Modern factory air boxes are already designed to draw air from the front of the car away from the hot engine bay. They use insulated ducting, sealed airbox chambers, and resonance tuning to deliver cool, filtered air efficiently. An aftermarket cold air intake often replaces this system with an exposed conical filter sitting directly in the engine bay, surrounded by heat from the engine, the exhaust manifold, and the radiator. The filter is open, which means it ingests engine bay heat along with the air. In many installations, the cold air intake is actually a hot air intake that draws warmer air than the factory system. Some well-designed cold air intakes do route the filter behind a heat shield or into a sealed air box that draws from a fender vent or lower grille opening. These can deliver genuinely cooler air and produce modest gains, 5 to 15 horsepower on some applications. But the generic $80 cone filter on a bracket in the engine bay, it's there for the whoosh sound. That's its job, and it does that job well. Just don't expect horsepower. The other issue with open-element intakes is filtration. Your factory air filter is a large, flat panel filter designed to catch particles down to a specific micron size while flowing adequate air. An aftermarket oiled cotton or foam filter flows more air, but also lets more particles through. Over tens of thousands of miles, those particles cause accelerated wear on cylinder walls, piston rings, and valve guides. The performance filter is slowly sanding the inside of your engine for a few horsepower you can't feel. If you run an aftermarket intake, use a quality dry filter rather than an oiled filter, and make sure it's properly sealed against unfiltered air bypassing the filter element. Aftermarket exhaust systems are the second most popular mod, and unlike intakes, they can produce real power gains, but the amount depends entirely on what you buy and what engine you're putting it on. An exhaust system has two performance-relevant functions, reducing back pressure and optimizing exhaust gas flow. The factory exhaust is designed to balance power output with noise regulations and emissions compliance. The catalytic converters and the muffler create restriction. Removing or reducing that restriction allows exhaust gases to exit the engine more easily, which can improve power. On a naturally aspirated engine, a catback exhaust, everything from the catalytic converter rearward typically adds 3 to 10 horsepower. That's the honest range for most applications. You're freeing up restriction at the tail end of the system, but the catalytic converters, the main restriction, are still in place. The gains are modest but real. On a turbocharged engine, exhaust modifications produce larger gains because the turbo is directly affected by exhaust flow. A turbo-back exhaust, replacing everything from the turbo housing rearward, including the downpipe, can gain 15 to 40 horsepower on some turbocharged applications, especially when combined with an ECU tune. The turbo spools faster, builds boost more efficiently, and the entire system benefits from reduced restriction. Headers, the exhaust manifold replacement that connects the cylinder head ports to the exhaust pipe, can produce meaningful gains on naturally aspirated engines, particularly those with restrictive factory manifolds. Long tube headers on a V8 can add 15 to 30 horsepower by improving exhaust scavenging and flow. Short tube headers are less effective, typically adding 5 to 15 horsepower. The takeaway, if you're naturally aspirated, an exhaust is primarily a sound mod with a small power bonus. If you're turbocharged, an exhaust, especially the downpipe, is one of the best bolt-on power mods available, but only when paired with a tune. These devices plug into the electronic throttle body and modify the signal between your gas pedal and the throttle. In the default sport mode, they map the pedal more aggressively. Pressing the pedal 30% sends a signal equivalent to pressing at 50%. The car feels more responsive. Your brain interprets this as faster. It's not faster, not by a single horsepower. The throttle controller doesn't change the engine's maximum output. It changes how the pedal input is translated to throttle opening. At full throttle, the car makes exactly the same power with or without the controller. All you've done is change the shape of the curve between idle and full throttle. You reach the same top-end performance sooner in the pedal travel, which feels more aggressive but doesn't add any actual capability. This is the purest example of a mod that exploits the gap between perception and reality. Your butt dyno says the car is faster. The real dyno says it's identical. The $300 to $500 you spent on a throttle controller bought you a feeling. Whether that feeling is worth the money is your call. But understand what you're buying. The term performance chip covers a wide range of products, from legitimate ECU tuning devices to absolute scams that do nothing. On one end of the spectrum, there are legitimate handheld tuners from companies like Cobb, SCT, HB Tuners, and others that actually reprogram the engine control unit, adjusting fuel maps, ignition timing, boost targets on turbocharged engines, transmission shift points, and other parameters. These devices produce real, measurable gains. On a turbocharged engine, a proper ECU tune is often the single best bang-for-the-buck modification available. 30 to 80 horsepower gains on many factory turbo cars for $400 to $700. The tune optimizes parameters that the factory left conservative for warranty, emissions, and global market reasons. On the other end, there are 30 to 80 performance chips sold on Amazon and eBay that plug into the OBD2 port and claim to add 35 horsepower and improve fuel economy by 20%. These are scams. Most contain nothing more than a blinking LED and a resistor. They don't communicate with the ECU. They don't change any parameters. They do absolutely nothing except drain your wallet and blink optimistically. Between these extremes are piggyback tuners that intercept and modify specific sensor signals, typically the boost pressure signal on turbocharged cars, to trick the ECU into adding more fuel or boost. These can produce real gains but are cruder than a proper ECU reflash and can cause issues if not calibrated carefully for your specific setup. The rule: if a tuning device costs less than $100 and claims massive gains with no installation beyond plugging into the OBD2 port, it's a scam. If it costs $300 to $700, comes from a reputable company, and requires flashing the ECU or connecting to the engine harness, it's likely legitimate. Research the specific product and brand before buying. Larger, wider wheels are one of the most popular aesthetic modifications, and they can improve performance, but only if done correctly. Done incorrectly, they make the car objectively worse. Heavier wheels hurt everything. Wheel weight is unsprung and rotational mass, the worst kind of weight on a car. Heavier wheels require more energy to accelerate, more energy to stop, and they make the suspension work harder to maintain contact with the road. A set of aftermarket wheels that weighs 5 pounds more per corner than the factory wheels adds 20 pounds of the most performance-damaging weight possible. Acceleration suffers, braking distance increases, ride quality deteriorates, fuel economy drops. If you're upgrading wheels for performance, the goal is lighter or equal weight with the same or wider width. Forged aluminum wheels are lighter than cast wheels. Flow-formed wheels are a middle ground. The lightest aftermarket wheels can shave 3 to 5 pounds per corner compared to factory wheels, which is genuinely beneficial. But many people go the opposite direction, buying large, heavy chrome or multi-spoke wheels that look impressive but hurt performance. Wider wheels with wider tires can improve grip. More contact patch means more traction, which improves cornering, braking, and launch. But wider tires also increase rolling resistance, add weight, and can create clearance issues with the suspension or fenders. There's a sweet spot for width that balances grip with the downsides. Going beyond that sweet spot produces diminishing or negative returns. Wheel spacers push the wheels outward for a more aggressive stance. They're cheap and popular. They're also mechanically questionable in many applications. Spacers change the wheel's offset, which alters the scrub radius, the geometry that determines how the steering responds to braking forces and road irregularities. Incorrect scrub radius can make the steering pull under braking feel vague or behave unpredictably. Spacers also add stress to wheel bearings and hub components that weren't designed for the extended leverage. Small spacers, 5 to 10 millimeters, on a car with adequate thread engagement and hub-centric rings are generally acceptable. Large spacers, 25 millimeters or more, on non-hub-centric studs, are asking for trouble. Dropping your car's ride height is one of the most visually transformative mods. A car that sits 1 to 1.5 inches lower looks dramatically better. The wheel gap closes, the stance improves, the proportions tighten, and properly done, lowering can improve handling by reducing the center of gravity and decreasing body roll. The key phrase is properly done. Properly done means matched lowering springs and dampers, either a complete coilover kit or springs matched to compatible shocks and struts. Improperly done means throwing $200 lowering springs on factory shock absorbers and calling it a day. Factory shocks are valved for factory ride height and factory spring rates. When you install stiffer, shorter springs on factory shocks, the dampers can't properly control the spring's motion. The ride becomes harsh, bouncy and poorly controlled. The car may feel okay over smooth roads but becomes a pogo stick over bumps. The shocks wear out faster because they're operating outside their designed range. And the handling, the thing you were trying to improve, can actually get worse because the suspension geometry changes in ways the factory shocks can't compensate for. A complete coilover kit, adjustable springs and dampers designed to work together at reduced ride height, costs $800 to $2,500 for quality options. Cheap lowering springs cost $150 to $300. The springs are not a bargain, they're a compromise that sacrifices ride quality, shock longevity, and potentially handling for the sake of a lower look. If you're going to lower the car, do it right or don't do it at all. A strut tower brace connects the tops of the front strut towers across the engine bay. The theory is that it stiffens the chassis by preventing the strut towers from flexing inward during hard cornering. Less flex means more precise suspension geometry, which means better handling. On older cars with less rigid unibody structures, think early 90s Civics, Miatas, older Mustangs, a strut tower brace can make a noticeable difference. The chassis was the weak link, and bracing it improved the suspension's ability to do its job. On modern cars, the chassis is significantly stiffer from the factory. Computer-aided engineering and high-strength steel have made modern unibodies remarkably rigid. Adding a strut tower brace to a 2020 Civic or a modern Mustang produces little to no measurable handling improvement because the chassis isn't flexing enough to benefit from the brace. The brace becomes a piece of engine bay jewelry. It looks purposeful and motorsport adjacent, but it's not doing meaningful work. If your car is pre-2005 and you're pushing it in autocross or track days, a strut tower brace might be worth $80 to $150. If your car is modern and you're driving on the street, it's an aesthetic purchase. Own that. On turbocharged cars, aftermarket blow-off valves, BOVs, are popular because they create that dramatic psh or flutter sound when you lift off the throttle. The sound is undeniably cool, but understanding what's happening helps you evaluate whether the mod has any performance value. A blow-off valve releases excess boost pressure from the intake piping when the throttle closes. This prevents the pressure wave from slamming back into the turbo compressor wheel, called compressor surge, which can reduce turbo longevity over time. The factory recirculating valve does this job quietly by venting the excess pressure back into the intake before the turbo. An aftermarket BOV vents to atmosphere, creating the sound, or vents more aggressively, creating a louder release. On most modern turbocharged cars with mass airflow sensors, venting boost to atmosphere can cause a brief rich condition when the blow-off occurs. Because the ECU has already metered the air and sent fuel accordingly, the excess fuel causes a momentary stumble or hesitation when you shift or lift off throttle. Factory recirculating valves avoid this because the air stays in the system. Some aftermarket BOVs are adjustable or hybrid, allowing some atmospheric venting for sound while recirculating enough to avoid drivability issues. Performance gain from a BOV, effectively zero. The factory recirculating valve works fine. The aftermarket BOV is a sound mod. If the pish makes your commute more fun, it's worth whatever you paid for entertainment. Just know that's the category it belongs in. An oil catch can installs in the positive crankcase ventilation (PCV) system and catches oil vapor and condensation before they re-enter the intake. On direct injection engines, which are prone to carbon buildup on the intake valves because there's no fuel washing over them, a catch can prevent oil-laden air from depositing additional carbon on the valves. This is a legitimate maintenance benefit. On direct injection engines driven for 60,000 miles or more, the carbon buildup from PCV vapors can meaningfully affect intake airflow and engine performance. A catch can reduces this accumulation. It's a preventive maintenance tool, not a performance upgrade. The misunderstanding is that catch cans add power. They don't, not directly, not immediately. They prevent future power loss by keeping the intake system cleaner over time. A catch can on a new car won't feel different. A catch can on a car that would have had severe carbon buildup at 80,000 miles will feel better at 80,000 miles than the same car without one. It's a long-term investment, not an instant result. A quality catch can cost $100 to $300. It needs to be emptied periodically, usually every oil change. On direct injection engines, it's a worthwhile maintenance addition. On port-injected engines, where fuel already washes the intake valves, it's less necessary. On carbureted engines from the 1980s, nobody buying a catch can for their 1985 El Camino, so this is a moot point. On manual transmission cars, a short throw shifter reduces the distance the shift lever travels between gears. Instead of a long, lazy throw from second to third, the shift is a quick, precise flick. The shift feels more mechanical, more direct, more deliberate. Short shifters don't add power. They don't make the transmission shift faster in terms of gear engagement speed. The synchronizers and the shift fork move at the same rate regardless of the lever's throw length. What they change is the driver's input, less hand movement, less time with one hand off the wheel, and a subjective feeling of connection and precision. For daily driving, a short shifter is a nice quality of life improvement for enthusiasts who enjoy the manual experience. For track use, the reduced shift time can shave fractions of a second per lap, meaningful in competition, irrelevant on the street. A quality short shifter costs $100 to $300. It's one of the more honestly marketed mods. Most short shifter manufacturers don't claim power gains. They sell the feel, and they deliver it. If you drive a manual and enjoy the mechanical interaction, a short shifter is a satisfying mod that delivers exactly what it promises. This is the section that saves you the most money, the correct order to modify your car if performance is the genuine goal. Most people modify in the wrong order. They start with the fun, visible, or loud mods, exhaust, intake, wheels, and work backward toward the foundational stuff. This is like putting a spoiler on a car before fixing the brakes. The order should follow the performance priority chain. Step 1, tires. Before anything else, the single largest improvement to grip, braking, and cornering. Everything else is bottlenecked by your tire's capability. Step 2, brakes. Pads, fluid, and rotors if needed. Being able to stop consistently and confidently under aggressive driving is more important and more safety critical than going faster. Step 3, suspension. Properly matched coilovers or spring and damper kits. Control the body. Improve turn-in. Reduce roll. This makes the car handle better at any speed, not just wide-open throttle. Step 4, driver skill. Autocross, track days, or performance driving school. Learn to use the platform's existing capability before adding more. Step 5, ECU tune. Turbocharged cars. The most efficient power modification gets the most from the existing hardware. Step 6, supporting mods. Intake, exhaust, intercooler upgrades, the bolt-ons that support and maximize the tune's gains. Step 7, major power modifications. Turbo upgrades, supercharger kits, engine internals. These are expensive, complex, and only worth the investment if the rest of the platform, tires, brakes, suspension, driver, can support the additional power safely. This order puts safety first, chassis second, and engine last. It's the opposite of what Instagram culture promotes, where the exhaust goes on first and tires go on never. But it's the order that produces the fastest, safest, and most enjoyable car at every budget level. Enough negativity. Here's where your money produces real, measurable results. Tires. The single best performance modification you can make on any car, period. Better tires improve acceleration, braking, cornering, wet grip, and driver confidence. Every dynamic metric that matters. Moving from budget all-season tires to quality performance tires can reduce braking distance by 15 to 30 feet from 60 miles per hour. That's not a small improvement. That's the difference between stopping in time and not. A set of quality tires costs $600 to $1,200 and transforms the car's capability more than $3,000 in bolt-on engine mods. ECU tune on turbocharged engines. As discussed, a proper tune from a reputable tuner is the best power per dollar modification for any forced induction car. Real gains, measurable results, often for under $700, quality brake pads and fluid. Upgrading to performance brake pads and high-temperature brake fluid doesn't add horsepower, that it improves the car's ability to stop, which matters more than acceleration in any real-world driving scenario. Performance pads resist fade during aggressive driving and provide more consistent stopping force. High-temp fluid prevents paper lock under hard braking. A $200 brake pad and fluid upgrade can meaningfully improve your safety margins. Suspension, done right. A quality coilover kit or matched spring and damper setup that's properly installed and aligned transforms how a car handles. Reduce body roll, improve turn and response, better mid-corner balance, and more predictable limit behavior. This is where you feel the difference on every drive, not just at wide-open throttle on a straight road. Weight reduction. Removing unnecessary weight improves everything: acceleration, braking, cornering, fuel economy. Every pound removed is a pound the engine doesn't have to push and the brakes don't have to stop. Removing 100 pounds from a 3,500-pound car is a 2.9% improvement that applies to every performance metric simultaneously. Remove spare tire carriers, heavy factory subwoofers, rear seats you never use, and any accumulated junk. Free power, literally. Driver skill. The most overlooked performance upgrade. A skilled driver in a stock car will outdrive a novice in a modified car on any track, any road, every time. A performance driving school or autocross event, typically $100 to $300 per day, teaches you to use the car's existing capability to its fullest before spending money on modifications that add more capability you don't know how to access. The fastest mod isn't a part, it's knowledge. Body kits, vinyl wraps, tint, LED lighting, interior trim, carbon fiber accents. These are purely aesthetic modifications. They don't add performance. They're not supposed to. And they're the most honest category of modification because nobody pretends a window tint adds horsepower. Aesthetic mods get judged harshly by the function over form crowd. But there's nothing wrong with wanting your car to look good. You drive the car every day. You see it in your driveway. You walk toward it in parking lots. If a $3,000 wrap in a color you love makes you smile every time you see it, that has genuine personal value. Where aesthetic mods become a problem is when they impair function. Excessively stretched tires on wide wheels, where the tire sidewall is pulled beyond its design geometry, looks aggressive but dramatically reduces grip and can cause tire debeating in hard cornering. Extreme static lowering that makes the car undrivable over speed bumps. Fake vents, fake scoops, and fake exhaust tips that pretend to be functional but aren't. These modifications prioritize appearance so aggressively that they make the car worse at being a car. The sweet spot for aesthetic mods is tasteful improvements that enhance the car's appearance without compromising its function. Quality tint improves privacy and reduces interior temperatures. A wrap protects the factory paint while allowing personalization. Subtle exterior upgrades that complement the car's lines rather than contradicting them. These add value to your daily experience without adding problems to your daily driving. Modifications can affect two things that most enthusiasts don't think about until it's too late: your insurance and your manufacturer's warranty. Insurance. Most standard auto insurance policies cover the car at its factory specification. If you've added $5,000 in modifications, wheels, suspension, exhaust, tinting, wraps, and the car is stolen or totaled, your standard policy may only pay the factory value. Your $5,000 in mods is uninsured loss. To protect modifications, you need to inform your insurance company and either add a rider for the modification value or switch to a policy that covers modified vehicles. Some companies specialize in modified car insurance. Others simply won't cover heavily modified vehicles. Either way, your mods need to be on the policy to be protected. Some modifications also increase your premium. A turbocharged engine that's been tuned to produce significantly more power changes the car's risk profile. Performance suspension, larger wheels, and other changes that alter the car's character can affect how the insurer evaluates your risk. Inform your insurer about significant modifications. Failure to do so can give them grounds to deny a claim. Warranty. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act protects you from blanket warranty denials based on aftermarket modifications. A dealer cannot void your entire warranty because you installed an aftermarket exhaust. However, and this is the critical distinction, they can deny a specific warranty claim if they can demonstrate that your modification caused the failure. An aftermarket tune that increases boost pressure followed by a turbo failure gives the dealer a legitimate argument that the tune caused the failure. An aftermarket exhaust followed by a transmission problem does not. The exhaust and transmission are unrelated systems. The practical reality is that warranty claims involving modified cars are evaluated case by case, and the burden of proof can be contentious. Some dealers are reasonable. Some use any modification as an excuse to deny claims, hoping you won't push back. Know your rights under Magnus and Moss. Keep documentation of all modifications, and be prepared to escalate to the manufacturer if a dealer denies a claim without demonstrating a causal link between the modification and the failure. Most bolt-on mods produce minimal gains because modern factory systems are already well optimized. Cold air intakes typically add 3 to 10 horsepower. Many actually ingest hotter air than the factory system. Exhaust systems are primarily sound mods on naturally aspirated engines. Significant power gains come on turbocharged engines when paired with a tune. Throttle response controllers add 0 horsepower. They change pedal mapping, not power output. Cheap OBD2 performance chips are scams with blinking LEDs. Legitimate ECU tunes produce 30 to 80 horsepower on turbocharged cars and are the best power per dollar mod. Heavy wheels hurt every performance metric. Lowering springs without matched dampers degrade ride quality and handling. The mods that actually work: quality tires, biggest single improvement, proper ECU tunes, brake upgrades, complete suspension kits, weight reduction, and driver training. The car modification industry sells two things: actual performance and the feeling of performance. Both have value, but only if you know which one you're buying. An exhaust that makes your car sound incredible is worth $800 if you value the sound. Just don't tell yourself it added 20 horsepower when it added 6. Before you buy any mod, ask one question: what does this actually change, and can I measure it? If the answer is measurable, dyno-proven horsepower, documented braking distance reduction, instrumented lap time improvement, it's a performance mod. If the answer is it feels faster or it sounds better, it's an experience mod. Both are valid purchases. But mixing them up is how people spend $5,000 making their car louder without making it meaningfully faster. If this video just saved you from buying a $40 Amazon performance chip or validated the exhaust you already bought for the sound, hit like. Drop your best and worst mod in the comments so we can publicly celebrate the wins and mourn the wastes, and subscribe so you stop spending money on feelings and start spending it on results. Later.